Hi everyone, welcome to our Entrepreneurship panel. Thank you so much to Annie, David, and Carly for being here with us today. I guess to start off, they're both partners, because David and Annie are it's the same company you're starting with, and Carly. They'll give an introduction to Urban, what exactly they do and kind of how they got into it. But the main idea is that we want to keep this very open. Hope you guys have questions to ask and just have it be more conversational. So I'm here now to get started.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Julie, and thanks everyone for being here today. Super excited for this panel and to just have an open conversation with you all. So definitely feel free to ask questions. I'm Annie. I'm the co-founder and CEO of TYCon Innovations, formerly at Harvard for computer science and economics. My background, as I mentioned earlier, is in data science, consulting VC, but really handle a lot of business development, strategy, doing everything that's also the less fun part of running a company, which is like fundraising, investor management, mentor management, everything in between. So if there's any questions about fundraising VC, definitely feel free to ask from that perspective. I'm really passionate about women in entrepreneurship and women in tech as well, and that's something that I can pay forward for female founders, especially in tech and also in supply chain tech. And so a little bit more about the work that we do here at TYCon Innovations. We are a IoT company, which if you guys aren't familiar with IoT, it's basically connected devices and connected sensors. And so we're an IoT company specifically for optimizing industrial liquid and fluid systems in supply chain and infrastructure. And so we work with a lot of large enterprises that you guys are all probably familiar with, from Unilever, for example, as one of our customers. We're named a top startup supplier of the year, to Coca-Cola company, to Cargill, the largest ag company in the world, to Ecolab and Chemicals and their manufacturing plants, Constellation Brands and brewing, to winemaking, and also the data centers that power our phones and our cloud and our AI. We're also those locations, making our world more efficient and also sustainable. And so, yeah, excited to be here. Maybe David can also share a little bit more about our specific technology, but yeah, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Annie. I'm David, CTO and co-founder of TYCon Innovations, and also Annie's older brother. My background is in chemistry and computer science from Brown University. Quite a bit of research experience, worked at various national labs, like the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, to experience in the chemical engineering field, the aerospace side at Boeing, also the water tech space. Also a super passionate about sustainability, making our world more efficient. In the organization, I do a lot of work related to the technical side, technical management, working with the engineering team, also working very deeply with customers to kind of cover problems and how do we build solutions towards them. And also handle a lot of team building as well, kind of thinking through hiring, building the team, and how do we collaborate, and how do we get people together to solve a single problem. Excited to be here. Also just diving a little bit more into technicals, my vision about the technology-wise for the company that I tell people is we are trying to build, you can think almost like the iPhone, but for the factory. Doing a lot of work where we design low-cost sensing systems to collect data, and then edge compute devices, so basically computers that sit on the factory floor to analyze all that data and how to tell factories how to be more efficient, control their processes to use less energy, water, downtime, fewer resources, and have less waste, and really help be more sustainable and more efficient in the face of a lot of the sustainability problems, as well as the growing population and the demand for greater resources.
Cool. Hi everyone. I'm Carly. I am graduating soon from Harvard with my degree in computer science and math, and I'm the founder of Wave Learning Festival. So we're a nonprofit, a little bit different, and we can dive into that if people are interested in how the for-profit and nonprofits are different. But I think also fundamentally the way we run them has a lot of similarities as well. So we are a global nonprofit offering free live online educational services for low-income students. We are based primarily in the US, so we've served over 20,000 students now online and also supported over 600 schools across the nation, doing services like customized tutoring for low-income students, doing college application workshops for students with learning disabilities, working with incarcerated youth and things like that. So it's evolved a lot over time. The main services that we provide online are these fun, diverse learning seminars during the summer, and those are taught like liberal arts college-style seminars proposed by students and run by volunteers across the country. as well as 24/7 tutoring during the school year, and college and career mentoring and things like that. Yeah, so super excited to be here and to talk with all of you and hopefully answer your questions.
Yeah, I'm just at any time if anyone has questions, just raise your hand and we'll keep it more open. But just to start off, thank you for the introduction. So could you guys explain a bit more about how you became interested in like your respective industries and how you got started with your ideas?
I'm happy to go first in this question. So I was just chatting with Julian and Carly about this earlier, and also some folks that talked earlier in today's conference. But I think fundamentally for me, what drives me and gets me out of bed every morning is the concept of problem solving. It's uncovering unobvious hidden problems that are plaguing our most foundational sectors of society, and then like coming up with solutions from scratch and actually solving those problems and then driving value for real people. And that concept of like uncovering this problem and problem solving and then being able to quantify that value and seeing that in real life in front of me and like knowing that, hey, we did this together is incredibly empowering and rewarding. And so I'd say that in terms of what really got me to get started is I knew I fundamentally had this passion for problem solving. And so your customers, your users, your investors, your even naysayers, for example, and be able to take feedback, iterate quickly, and just continue to, again, solve problems and drive real value for people. That's ultimately, I think, my passion, and so that's something I get to do every day, and I'm so grateful to be able to be also working with such a brilliant team and doing so.
Yeah, I think I echo Annie's sentiment. With the founding story of H2OK Innovations, there's many different stories. Like there's like 3 different stories of how our company got started. Like one we tell our investors, one like we tell people when we go grab beer with, and also one that's a little bit driven by spite that I tell for fun. But I think the fundamental underlying thing is also like really like problem solving. Really want to create like real world impact. I think like through starting finding a problem that you're really passionate about, and really like diving deep into it and understanding like the pain points is super interesting. And I also find that when you're working on something, like we have a fundamental feeling that like we can make real impact at a internet, like not just national scale but international scale, and create a positive change to society, and that really drives me. And I feel like there's a huge amount of like empowerment through that and drive through that and excitement through that, and kind of building a team to solve a huge issue is really, really kind of fulfilling for me. And yeah, I think that combined with just also growing up, Annie and I, like we come from like an industrial background as well, and so learning about problems when we were growing up and really paying back and paying forward to these industries is what drives me, makes me smile.
I want to hear the spite story later.
Okay.
We'll chat later, Carly.
Yeah, for me, I mean, when Wave got started, it was totally unexpected. It was never something that was planned. We can talk more about our starting stories later. I think that's one of the questions. But it was totally an accident when the pandemic started and schools were shutting down and summer programs were shutting down. And Wave Learning Festival started very much as a temporary project that I reached out to friends too, and I was like, we have a chance to help students for the summer. Let's put together something small. We'll grab some of our friends, teach some classes, and just get started from there. But it kind of snowballed. But for me, like my interest in education started pretty early. So when I was little, when I was like 4, the first thing I always wanted to be was a teacher because I thought my teacher was so cool. And I thought she was just the biggest role model in my life. So I thought, okay, when I grow up, I want to be a teacher and I want to come up with curriculum and inspire kids and help them just do the best that they can. So a lot of my life has been doing, teaching. I've done a lot of volunteering with my local organization, starting with Sunday Friends, which is a local organization that does tutoring for low-income students. And I did some computer science tutoring for kids, did some translation for parents. When I got older, I was tutoring at my school, so working with students one-on-one on a variety of subjects. And then when I got to college, I was also doing like teaching assisting for my different classes that I was in. So it's always just been just like one of the things that I find the most rewarding in my life. And so I feel like just that kind of background and that kind of interest in teaching led up to also this just happening. And I feel like for education, it's like the root problem of everything that comes in a society. Like I feel like if you want to empower kids, if you want to empower communities to be strong and healthy and doing their best, then what you can do first is help kids through education and make sure that everything's, starting with a strong foundation. So I think that's how it started.
Really enjoyed hearing those stories, but as David mentioned, 3 stories, I'm actually quite curious as well, and it goes along with the next question that I wanted to ask, which is more about turning an idea into what you guys have now. And there's a lot of work that goes into it. So what exactly is it like, and what was the process like? The fundraising, getting everything together. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I'll leave the 3 stories for David to tell later. But answering, Julie, your question about what does it take to get started, ultimately you just have to go. You just have to just go and do it. Like take the initiative, get over your fears, just go and do it. At the end of the day, maybe this is bad advice to children. Parents, close your ears. But as a college dropout, a Harvard dropout, for me it was like, this is a time in my life where I have the least amount of risk ever. Like my risk will always be continuing to grow when I get older and older. So like now is the time to go out and chase your, like create innovations to solve problems that you're passionate about, for example. Like go and create, chase your wildest dreams, because whatever happens, like worst, I'll just go back to Harvard, like who cares, you know what I mean? So like, and so when you kind of realize that perspective, like everything just becomes so much less, say, scary, if it makes sense. It's like, the stakes are much lower. And so I think first thing, realizing that perspective, like, hey, we come from extremely privileged backgrounds to be where we are today, doing the work we're doing today, and like at the, environments we're doing that today. And so take that and then run with it. And so you mentioned just doing, so how kind of we got started was through this, we were part of this program called Techstars, and we were specifically in this program called Farm to Fork, which is a startup accelerator, but it was specifically focused on food tech. So in that period, this is height of COVID, winter of 2021, we were instant connected to 120 of the most senior executives of the largest food and beverage companies in the world. And so we took that opportunity like with both hands and just went and was extremely aggressive about it. So we actually, for me, we're incredibly sales driven as an organization. And so we make sure that whatever we're building needs to be solving real problems for real people who are generating real value in a way that someone will pay for it. And the ultimate way to validate that actually is true is by selling. And so when we were in Techstars, our first customer was the biggest ad company in the world, like a $120 billion company, right? And then we actually sold our first contract without a product. And so we obviously we knew how we're going to create it. We knew that we were going to be able to do it, but we wanted to make sure that someone was going to pay for it. There was a market viability for this product. And so we sold that first contract. And then we went and built it and delivered it, and it was incredibly successful. And so have that just immense relentlessness of just being hyper focused in whatever I'm building needs to have a viable market and go and sell. And that's something I give my peers. We're part of a the top clean tech innovation community in North America, TYCon Labs, based out of Boston. There's a lot of people who are oftentimes stuck in just continuous R&D cycles forever, where they're R&Ding for 9 years and their product never goes to market. And I always tell them just go sell, and they're like, oh, but when I'm done creating it, the market will come to me. I'm like, that's never true. You can't assume that. And so that's the advice I would give. Just go and do it. Jump into conversations. Be incredibly humble. Be incredibly empathetic. I always come into every conversation, no matter if I'm talking to the C-suite exec of a Fortune 50 company or a process engineer in rural Georgia, of thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm really excited to be here today and to learn from you today. And what are your biggest headaches? What are your biggest line items? What are your biggest costs? What keeps you up at night? And come in with respect to the people you're talking to, and a deep passion for listening and understanding. And you'll be surprised by the hidden problems that you can be able to uncover that your peers in the industry have never even known. So these are things advice I would give to folks in the room who are interested in entrepreneurship. Just go and do it.
Definitely, I think I completely resonate with Annie. We're on the same team, so not much to add to there, but also kind of just immense amount of drive and able to accept when I think empathy in terms of listening to your naysayers, and when people say this is not going to work, really deeply understand why they think that way, but also have a lot of confidence in yourself and your kind of your mission, your drive, and what you're trying to solve, and be able to kind of push forward. Because there's many ups and downs to entrepreneurship. If you start your own thing, and there's going to be a lot of people, most people are going to say no, but just being able to push through that. And like our first investor that invests in your company, like during our conversation, like first conversation, we told them like, we'll do whatever it takes for this company to succeed. Like, we'll like hands down like do anything. And so like he really saw the drive, and like he invested in our organization. Really kind of just like being inspired by what we're trying to solve and what we're trying to do and our passion. So I think that's also something that advice I can share. And also another thing that really drives us is being able to kind of create representation in this space, because in the clean tech space, you know, in the accelerator that we're like co-working space that we're working out of, we're the youngest people in the like this co-working space. We're also one of the only few people of color, and Annie's like one of the only female founders as well, CEOs as well. So it's really inspiring to be able to create like space for young people in this space, and also for Asian Americans as well, because there's so few of us. I feel like a lot of Asian Americans, people talk about like this class ceiling where people kind of, you know, we advance to a certain level, but then we're not able to reach like the C-suite executives. And I think really want to be able to build something from the ground up, be in the positions where we can inspire like other people like us. It's really empowering.
Sorry, what was the question again?
How'd you get started?
Okay, cool. No, I'm just like, I'm learning. I'm like,
how'd you get started?
Advice. I'm like, see, it's all sinking in. Yeah, for us, the way we got started, it was very quick. It was the spring of 2020 when the pandemic had just closed down schools, and I had just been sent home from school. I packed all my stuff in 3 days. I was like, oh my god, things are so weird. All my classes are online. All my friends are gone. I'm so lonely in my room. And I was talking to some of my high school friends, and they were just like, you know, we have no idea what's happening in the foreseeable future. We're never going to see our teachers again. All our exams are moved. Nothing's happening this summer. We have no idea what's happening. And every time I turned on the news, I would just see all these interviews by teachers and parents just talking about how hard it was to figure out what to do for their kids and how to make sure they were still learning and not falling behind, because who knew when schools were going to open again? You know, the next year, next 2 years, next 3 years. So I texted to my friends and I was like, okay, let's do this project. We can just build something small. Let's put something together as fast as we can. And over the next 4 days, we got this website up and launched, and we were taking applications from college students to teach. And in the next 3 weeks, we had launched our service to our first batch of students. So our priority was really just to get things up and rolling as quick as possible, because we knew people were waiting, and we didn't want this to have to wait even longer. And then once we got started, it was a whole just journey of responding to what was happening and adapting very quickly as things changed, because when we started, we had 11 classes, and then we had 500 kids sign up. We said, okay, this is not enough, so we're gonna go out and recruit 50 teachers. And then 2,000 kids signed up. We're like, okay, we need more teachers. So it was just always testing what's working, what's not working, talking to students and teachers and seeing what we can continuously change. And it just snowballed from there. And then once we got to the fall, we said, okay, we have all this great infrastructure, we have 10,000 kids who have come to learn with us. It's been so much fun, so what can we do to get deeper at the root of these educational issues? And so that's when we started talking to teachers around the country. We were emailing like thousands of teachers every single day, being like, can we understand what's happening in your school? What can we do to help your kids? And just having these calls every day and trying to figure out what best we could do. And so that's when we launched things like tutoring and working with these schools more in depth, and reaching out to schools in more rural regions that we hadn't contacted before. And we were really lucky to have the help of some amazing mentors as well who encouraged us. And it's just been growing since then. And I think to echo some of the evidence or some of the advice that you guys shared, I agree. I think if you have an idea, you just gotta go for it. Because I know a lot of us are, you know, a little risk averse. Maybe we want to do well in school. Our parents maybe have some sort of vision of our lives that they told us before. But you know, there's no perfect moment to start your idea. And I would say that if there's a problem that you really care about, you just have to do it, because there's never going to be a perfect time. You're never going to know everything that you need to. You're never going to be, you know, the perfect person or be the most skilled person to do it. But if you're the person who cares the most, and this is the problem that you keep thinking about day in and day out, then you're the right person to do it. And I agree, this is the lowest risk time for you to just give it a go. And I think one thing is when you commit, like really magic happens because you can think about this idea like, oh, this is how I would do it. This is maybe what would go right and what would go wrong. But before you actually take that leap, you never know all the people that are going to come into your life and help you and be inspired by your courage and your commitment and just willing to help you. And you never know how much you're going to grow and just all the things you're going to learn along the way. So I have faith in all of you. If you want to start something, that it's possible much sooner than you think and that you can do a lot better at it than you could ever imagine.
Thank you guys for so amazing.
Questions?
Yeah. Just a quick question. I'll introduce myself. I'm Alex. I just graduated high school. I'm in business school this fall. I'm very excited. I was just wondering, what's your perspective on the value of business school in the entrepreneurship field? Because I've heard it's typically quite traditional. Do you think there's any value to be gleaned from business school?
When you're talking business school, do you mean like MBA or what do you mean by business? MBA, right? Undergrad. I mean, I don't know if I can really speak that well to it because I was a liberal arts school, right? Harvard's a liberal arts school, so we didn't have business. I was doing econ, I guess, was semi the closest, but it's not really close.
I suppose just college, generally, what would you say?
College is extremely fundamental for me. I will not be who I am today, doing the work I do today, at the place I do it today, with the people I do it today, if I didn't go to Harvard, 100%. Or not just Harvard, just go to college. And so I feel like, for me, so I did 2 years, and then after the second year, when COVID hit, that's when I stopped out and started HOK full time. But those 2 years were so incredibly fundamental for me. So, especially coming from the environment and the background that I came from high school, I wasn't exposed to this type of stuff, and I wasn't exposed to these resources. So even thinking about Techstars, our first Techstars connection, how we got in was because it was a Harvard Innovation Lab that I was really close with, the folks there, and they made an intro, and that's kind of how we got in. So I would say that I'm incredibly grateful, and I recognize the work it's had. But I think my perspective is it goes to a point. The marginal returns for the marginal cost, they start converging. And so for me, it just felt right for me to leave after the time I spent there, but I will say it is very, very crucial.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can add some of my thoughts on that. So I think for an undergrad business program, it depends on what your goals are. I think if you're really set on being an entrepreneur, you can kind of study anything in college because studying other things I think will actually help you build that background. So for me, I studied computer science and math. I think that's not maybe directly feeding into the work that I do, but I think it was really cool to learn how to study other things and definitely goes into some of the research and some of the innovation that we're doing on the tech end. I think for a business program, speaking to some of what my friends have experienced at other schools, it's really good if you want to go into a traditional business kind of path, if you want to do investment banking or doing consulting like that. Otherwise, I think you can really jump into entrepreneurship with any undergrad degree. So I would go for a business program if you think you're going to really enjoy it and that's what you want to learn the most. But if you have other interests, I think you shouldn't hold yourself back.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. I think a lot of talk about the contributions of coping and digital starting. And within entrepreneurship, I also about Bible products. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and what you feel like is enough of a certain product to actually get started.
I feel like we didn't have a minimum product when we got started, to be honest. I think what MVP for me means is you have a problem that is repeatable, that basically the problem that you're solving that you can go to other people and also they'll when you talk about this, they'll understand and they resonate with it, and you also be able to solve that problem for them with the same type of technology or solution. And when we got started, we didn't have we just pivoted, and we were in a problem discovery phase. So in terms of going to Techstars, and I think you don't need an MVP to get started. I think what you really need is you need to be really interested in the problem in the space, and just go and learn about the problems and talk to people, have interviews, and really dive deep into what is the pain, what can you build to help alleviate that or build something of value to them. And so I think the idea of having an MVP, like usually when companies discover their MVPs are after they have their seed funding and go into their Series A, actually. So a lot of people, like most people raise money and don't have MVPs. So.
Yeah, for us, I would say we definitely had an MVP. And what that was we had a very simple website initially that just described what we wanted to offer. And we just had a Google form that we sent, hey, if you want to take a class, here are the options, fill out this form. And then we had a spreadsheet with 500 responses, and then manually sorted kids into classes. So that was our MVP. It was not efficient, it was not great. But we just had no idea that we were going to get that many kids to sign up. We thought maybe we'd have 20 students. So we were like, okay, well, classes start tomorrow, so someone has to do this. And that person will be me. So yeah, that was fun. But then afterward, we developed an algorithm to match kids to classes based on their interests and smoothing things out. We built a lot more of our back end so that kids could actually sign into their accounts and have recommendations and be paired to students with their teachers and have all tech logistics happen automatically. But for us, it was really just using these low-tech tools, whatever simple, Google Forms is fine, just to get things running and see how things work for the first time, and then be able to polish from there.
Actually, I think I'm going to disagree with David in a way. I mean, everyone has their own opinions about this, right? So take it with a grain of salt. For me, I feel just forget MVP, minimum viable product. Okay, let's just see what do each word of that mean. Minimum. So exactly, Carly. My perspective is, if you're doing AI, AI should never be artificial intelligence, just be intelligence when you're first starting. That's what minimum means. You manually sort out people into classes, right? Do whatever you need to do, the lowest barriers, that's minimum. Viable, what does viable mean? It means you have a market, it means you're solving a need. It means that this is something that someone will buy, right? You're gonna make money off this. And so someone will pay for this. And so that is just selling, you need to sell. And then product is, some sort of solution that addresses the problem. But I'd say that if you think of minimum viable product, the reason viable comes before product is because you need to have viability, right? And so that's kind of my perspective. Of course, when we sold our first contract, we knew how we built the product, and we knew that we were going to be able to do it, but we just need to go and prove that this is viable before you build the product.
I think maybe another thing to add is that's different, but I feel what really makes me, or I guess for Annie, to decide to do this full-time committed is when you're building a solution and you get excited about it and you're wait, okay, this is something that I can see become something that can change the world, something that can make a substantial impact or sustainable impact on something. And that's what really compels me to decide, hey, okay, I can pursue this full time. This is something that's worth diving deep, full 100% commitment into.
Building on the awareness about viability, so how do you collect customer feedback to ensure they're MVPs and whatnot, or actually especially in the early stage? I'm curious, how did you get that?
Yeah, I can start with this one. I would say that to determine viability, actually hearing what people say is not the best indicator. I would say you need to look at the numbers and whether people are actually coming back to what you're doing. So for us, after our first batch of classes, our second batch of classes, we're continually seeing more and more students come than we could even accommodate. And so I think for us, that was the biggest indicator that what we were doing was hitting, and people actually enjoyed what we were offering, they needed what we were offering. And obviously it was also really nice to see these heartwarming stories of kids and parents just telling us how much they loved it. But I think seeing that repeated, just people coming back and wanting it so much and signing up for way more than what we could offer was the best indicator that what we had was actually useful.
Yeah, I think 100% agree with Carly. And I think it differs a lot depending on what industry you're in and what you're doing. So for us, we're doing B2B, right? Business to business. Carly's doing more, I don't want to say consumer because you're a nonprofit, but working with direct people. And so we're selling to we're a business selling to businesses. And so for us, every single market research call I mentioned earlier, right? We connected with 120 senior executives of the largest food and beverage companies in the world. And so every single one of these market research calls, we turn into a sales call. And so we start off asking open-ended questions, and then we start digging into questions, these problems, and we start thinking, oh wait, I could this, or I'd start ideating solutions just like on, during the call on my feed. Like, oh, we could do, what if we did this and like this could solve this issue that you're talking about right now? And like, oh, could you connect me with like the person in your team who'll be like a buyer for this? Like who's the champion, who's the buyer, who's, for us it's like supply chain and like sustainability is a champion, like who is the gatekeeper, for example, in this organization, just dig deeper and deeper, and like just don't be afraid of like really utilizing your resources, right? People want to help, you just have to tell them how to help you. And of course, also part of what we deeply believe in our team at H2OK is what we call give first. So we ask for help, we also pay it forward to other people. And so at the end of every call, I'm always like, also, oh, if there's a way I can be helpful to you, let me know, even if I'm, this like 19-year-old girl talking to this freaking, C-suite executive of work company. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I'll help your kids with like college admissions if you want, you know what I mean? Like building rapport, but like also thinking how can I just pay it forward in any way I can. And so I'd say that is some thoughts from my end, but like it varies so much depending on the industries and what you're selling.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add here, but also like, if you have subscriptions, recurring paying customers, that's also really key. And like Annie talked about, talking with a lot of people and understanding their problems and seeing able to draw the line between the similarities between them and being like, hey, are there similarities or am I just doing discrete things? And it's actually okay when selling B2B in the initial phases, at least in our industry, I feel like there is a little bit of consulting-ish aspect of when I first got started. We were solving a little bit of unique problems, but we had to also really deeply think through, like, what is the underlying thing that ties them all together? How do I convert this to a people product that I can go and sell to other people and they can resonate with the problem that we're trying to solve and something that they afford.
I think you guys have all touched a little bit on risk, so I'm curious how your mindsets towards risk have changed now that your companies have kind of grown, and I know you said you started out where it was really low risk, but I'm sure that maybe has changed now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially when you're VC backed, you have suddenly this entire, like people who put millions of dollars into the work that you're doing that you have to deliver. So, I feel that I'm a person, if you can't tell already, like I'm completely, I don't sugarcoat things, so I just tell you stuff straight up, right? So like, entrepreneurship might sound glamorous, but it's very lonely. I don't know how I would do it without my brother, like my co-founder, right? Like my brother being my co-founder. It's incredibly lonely, it's incredibly high pressure, it's incredibly like so many ups and downs, you need to have a lot of emotional strain. Because you come to realize that like we're a 17-person team now, but like I am single-handedly responsible for 17 people's jobs. And so like I need to go and do it. Like there is no option to fail. Like I need to go, right? And so having that pressure, I think it changes a little bit in terms of risk. I think he also assess things like how much runway do you have, right? Like what's your burn rate? So like how much cash are you spending? How much cash do you have in the bank? Stuff like that. And be very realistic about it, but you need to take risks, like that exploration part of like, hey, what about this market? Like, what if we could tap into this industry, for example, and go and take those risks, but then be realistic about it after a certain amount of time, like, hey, is this working or not? And like, if it's not working, we should change this, or pivot this, or pivot this, and continue to refine. Like, I'd say have conviction, but don't be blind. Like, don't be blind to reality as well. And so it's a delicate balance for sure, but it's a feeling. Like you will know if okay, this is not working out. I need to change this to, maybe focus in this direction or like change this like this feature, for example, and beyond.
And I also feel like in the beginning we were not really that metrics driven as an organization, and now we're starting to become more metrics driven because like in the beginning, like I think one of the things that really struck me was we're working with this really large organization, this huge deal, and a lot of engineering resources was put towards this customer who said, yeah, I'm going to scale this is going to be the multi-million-dollar deal, this is going to grow super quickly, and we're like, yes, let's go, and then put a lot of resources into it, and right now, because there's a lot of layoffs happening, the economics is turning down, and actually all our kind of main stakeholders we work with that organization are leaving the organization, it's like extremely stressful because you're like, wow, like, all of these resources we sunk in, like half a year, over a year of engineering resources and like these engineering hours, like it's product that's already close to being done, being able to be delivered, is potentially like not being able to be, pushed out to market because of certain circumstances within that organization. Extremely stressful and things that kind of keep me up at night. But then also the other thing of being able to be metrics driven is that nowadays, like we have a pipeline. We know these customers are going to pay this amount. If this deal doesn't go through, all I really need to do is double down on sales in these type of customers with my salespeople, and then it brings some comfort in knowing that, hey, even when something doesn't work out, there's a lot of other opportunities that all I need to do is kind of like, do this shift and refocus and being able to kind of execute. And I feel like that allows you to also feel empowered because because the thing is like, when you're selling B2B, and when you're working with customers, it's not just you, it's also the other person needs to agree with you. And so when like something doesn't work out, at least I know there's a lot of these other people or other things that I can put a lot of effort in and get returns on. And it brings some comfort in this kind of uneasiness that, hey, the organization will still survive as long as I put my efforts in these certain things.
Yeah, I think a few unrelated different thoughts. So one is, I think that risk is like a muscle, and the more you go for it, the less certain things feel like risks. When we first started, we were really afraid to talk to schools and promise things because we never done it before. And we were like, we don't want to upset LAUSD, and like not do what we promised to do. But after we did that the first couple of times, we felt a lot better about promising things to schools and working with big speakers and working with large numbers of students because we knew that we'd done it before and we felt like we could do it again. And I think also having a team that's willing to do whatever it takes to rise to the occasion really helps. I'm really grateful for my awesome teammates because things have definitely come up along the way that were unexpected. You have unexpected tech issues the day before class is supposed to go live. We promised that we would help this low-income school provide tutoring for all semester, and then 5 of our tutors quit, and suddenly we're like, what are we gonna do? We were supposed to like do this big presentation, and then some of our people who were supposed to provide resources for this presentation didn't show up. And so in those moments, you're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? But then having a team that's like, we will stay together to just find new people to fill in this gap, or we're gonna work on this ourselves until we get this done, or we're gonna get the data that we need to put together the resources that we need. And so just having faith in yourself that you can rise to this occasion definitely helps.
I have a question that's a little bit like related, not really. And this first question kind of focuses more on the issue of innovation. So I would like to ask how much what you learned at school was essential in the product that you were selling? Like, did you kind of create a product, or you kind of outsource part of the knowledge into creating this product? And a follow-up question that would cover everyone is, how do you choose your teammates? How do you start from your close circle, like family and friends, or you kind of just go for someone that you think has the credentials to help you do that?
Cool. So I will answer the first one, but I feel like David probably has a better answer for that because he is also more technical. And for me, I'd say it was less, the actual knowledge itself was less important, but more so Harvard gave me A, the resources and connections, but B, also most importantly taught me how to think about problems and approach problems. Like, I think David and I work really well together because we're also really complementary in terms of who we are, our personalities, how we think, and our skill sets. And so I am more of a creative in a way that I do, right? Like, I think about things in a creative way. I come up with creative solutions to solve decade-old problems, and I think that's something I bring to the table. David is an executor, and so he's extremely good at executing, extremely fast learner, and is an operator. And so you need to find people on your team that really fill each other's gaps in a way. But for me personally, it just is the way of how to think of critical thinking was what Harvard taught me. But I want to pass it to David because I feel like he has a completely different perspective on this question as well.
I do think college, a big thing is teaching you how to think. I think also for me, a big part of college, but also just through my past experiences, is being part of learning different interdisciplinary skill sets in the sense of different subjects within engineering, chemistry, computer science. I think through that, what it taught me was like, I was not afraid to learn new things and new kind of engineering topics and dive deep into something. I think that's one of the big things is like having the confidence in yourself that, hey, even though this is not something I'm super familiar with, I'm super important meeting with this industry in like say cosmetics industry. And I'm like, okay, how does this work? And just being able to dive deep into it and then really figure things out and learn is really kind of important. And I also think that once you have experience in a variety of industries and a variety of different kind of disciplines, you also start to be able to see, hey, this is kind of similar to here, this is similar to here, you can like build bridges and bring things together. I think that's important as well. But in the end, I think the biggest thing is like not being afraid to learn. And because when actually when Annie and I went to university, we came from our high school was not like a super well-known high school. We weren't really as prepared as a lot of the other students going to college. And so when I first entered college, I knew. But then what it taught me was like being able to hustle and be like, wait, I start off behind everyone, but now like after a year, it's the same, and you're able to outperform others. I think that really kind of taught me a lot and built a lot of confidence.
Actually, I just want to quickly add something. So, our father had this, but this is a value that, or like an idea that I believe in. It's the 80-20 rule, which is spend 20% of your time, you will learn 80% of the field. And it'll take you the rest of the 80% of your time to learn the rest of that 20% of the field. So what you should do is you should spend 20% of your time learning 80% of the field and do that for many different fields, and now you'll have a competitive advantage to your peers or the people in whatever industry that you want to go into, because now you can be able to piece things and put things together and function at the intersection of multiple different disciplines that you are at 80% of both, like 5 different industries or 5 different disciplines. In David, for example, like, we do IoT, so what that means is we have hardware, we have software, we have machine learning, we have also like low-level coding, operating systems and beyond. We're working in industrial systems, so you need chemical engineering and a deep science background as well. So like we're functioning at the intersection of all of these things. And I remember this distinct experience where when we were first starting the company, we were on this call with senior scientists of one of our customers, and they had a lot of experience in sensing. So we were going through introductions, right? And everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I have a PhD in chemistry at Stanford. I've been working in sensing for the past sensors for the past 40 years." And then everyone's like going through the intros. They're like, "Yeah, like I graduated at Harvard like a month ago," and we're like going through our intros, but like they could not do what we're doing because they are so like deeply focused in their rabbit hole that they've been thinking about for 40 years, and they can't see beyond that. And because we're functioning at the intersection of so many of these different disciplines, we're able to now create creative solutions to be solving decade-old problems. And so that's like advice I would give to the team today, or like let's hear today, is like really expand that knowledge base, because that will be extremely helpful as a competitive advantage.
Yeah, I think part of what this is getting at too is I see a lot of people wonder, is it okay for me to build in an industry that I don't have expertise in? And I think the answer absolutely is yes, because being willing to do the work is honestly most of it. Because if you're willing to do the work, you can talk to experts who do have that knowledge. You can read the research. There's an incredible amount of mentorship out there and people who are willing to advise you and fill in the gaps that you don't have. There's amazing teammates who will have that knowledge or background that you don't have. And if you can sell the vision of why you believe in it and you're able to work with them, there's always a way to make that work. And if you think that you have to be the most knowledgeable person in an industry to do the idea that you want to do, then you're never going to be the person to build that product, because there's always going to be someone who knows more than you, who has more technical knowledge. But there are tons of people out there who have done amazing innovations where they don't have a PhD in that field, where you haven't been studying it for 10 years. And I think even for me, even though we're not as industrially intense, there was definitely not a lot of knowledge that I didn't have going into building Wave. But I was really lucky because I was able to just reach out to mentors who had been working in the nonprofit space for decades, people who had been grant makers for the biggest nonprofits in the world, people who had done education research for their entire lives, and be able to pull on their advice for how we should be aligning for most impact, how we should be speaking to different stakeholders and things like that. And it was all possible. And speaking to your second point about the finding teammates, for me initially, I think also, okay, so with a nonprofit and for-profit, I think it's different because for us, we don't have to consider like equity and things like that. So it does become a little bit simpler, but still finding a co-founder is really important because that's the person that you're talking to like for 10 hours a day. It's the person that you see more than anyone else. You're like married basically. God knows I'm not ready for marriage. But in the beginning, I was turning to some of my closest friends who I had been in school with. We'd worked on projects together, and I picked my first teammates because, first of all, I knew that they were incredibly dedicated people, extremely smart, just really curious people. But also, I just thought they were really good people, and I could trust them. They fundamentally really cared about doing the right thing, and they had integrity, and that was really important to me. And so I knew that whatever we were doing for the same goal of addressing these educational issues, that we wanted the best for our students, and we would always do what's right first. So that was really important for me. But as we scaled the team, obviously it wasn't just people that I knew and my friends. And so we started opening up applications nationwide. We were doing a lot of outreach to universities across the country and just emailing tons of high schools. We were able to get on the news for a couple of times, so that was definitely helpful to get more reach about students who hadn't heard of us before. And we really wanted to prioritize diversity of experiences for our first couple of hires as well, because especially, I feel like with a team, your first few people that you bring on are so integral to shaping what your group is like overall, because the first people bring in the next people, they set the expectations for what culture is like, and so if you have a couple of people who all think the same way, or all come from the same kind of background, you get very siloed. So getting those first few people to come from a breadth of experiences and opinions was really important for us.
Great, thank you guys so much for an amazing panel. Thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But, but I'm sure you guys can come speak to them more outside the room, but we'll have to wrap it up. Do you have another round of applause for our panelists?
If you ever want to connect or just, I'm really passionate about mentorship, feel free to connect over LinkedIn or email me at annie@h2innovations.com. Very happy to help in any way I can. So please reach out.
You're in New York.
I'm happy to talk to any of you. Feel free to find me. I'll be here all night. And also thank you so much to your amazing moderator. Really appreciate it.